Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to our PGA conversation with the producers of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. I want to thank you all for tuning in live and also give a big thank you to CBS for making this Q&A possible tonight. Featured tonight on our panel is co-executive producer Denise Rehrig and supervising producer and executive in charge Tanya Michnevich Bracco. And we're hoping that momentarily we will have showrunner and executive producer Chris Licht, who is currently taping. For everyone watching today, you will be able to participate in the Q&A by submitting your written questions utilizing the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And our moderator is going to do his best to get to some of those questions during the session. Speaking of moderators, I'd love to introduce our moderator this evening, Eric Deggans. Eric is NPR's TV critic, as well as a media analyst and contributor for MSNBC and NBC News. A journalist for more than 30 years, he is also the author of the book, Race Baiter: How the Media Wields Dangerous Words to Divide a Nation. Thanks so much, Eric. I'll turn it over to you now.
All right, thanks a lot. And thanks a lot, Denise and Tanya, for joining us. I'm going to be sure to give Chris the appropriate amount of hassle. I'm going to give him a hard time for showing up late. But you guys are actually doing the show right now. You have a show that's going to air tonight. So thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And in fact, Tanya, you were showing me a little bit about how you guys put the show together. You're in Florida. Denise, you're in New York?
I was in New York. I'm actually in Missouri at the moment.
You're in Missouri. Okay, so can you explain to us a little bit like how this works with you guys sort of all over the country putting together a show that we're going to see tonight?
Well, Denise, you want to start? I'll take it. It was...
Hit it, T. And let me just preface this by saying that Tanya is the reason that we are even on the air every single night. Of course, Stephen is the person that we see, but Tanya is the one who actually makes it possible that we are all here and getting on the air. So Tanya, it's all you.
She is too kind. She is too kind. No. You know, the one thing I can say is the technology these days is incredible, and that this couldn't even, I think, have been possible 10 years ago. Like this pandemic really hit at a time where the infrastructure had gotten just good enough for people to be able to take it on from home. And, you know, thank goodness, you know, there were already enough online ways to communicate, because that's just the essential key to keep things going. So between, you know, obviously the email, but Slack is a live source. Our script program is Scripto. I know there are a few different versions, and but Scripto allows each and every one of the writers to write their section at home, and then the minute they click publish, it's into the script and has the ability to be put into a rundown. And then everybody on the producing and crew and staff side will be able to get the information as it's happening, as it's getting published. And then the question becomes betting how much of, what are the percentage that is actually gonna make it to Showtime, or whether it's gonna be changed and cut by then. But at least once it's in there, we know that it's in the show, you know, it's in the script. So I think, those are the two key components. And I think communication, we have a production meeting every morning, the writers meeting, production meeting, all on Zoom. So everybody stays involved and informed. And on a technical side, oh my gosh, it's been, it's been crazy. But thank goodness we have, you know, shared drives and files. But one of our amazing crew members, she's actually a graphics operator, works on a machine called the Expression, and the company Ross that produced Expression had created a virtual control room. And it didn't necessarily have to work for us, but she pitched it and we're like, what, come again? And we literally, we took that and tied it to our existing control room so that everybody can VPN in from home and do their jobs. And I can even give you a little quick peek at us doing the show right now. I don't know how legal this is, so I'm sorry about that. But this is our control room. So many of us have a screen for our control room. Let me unpin it. And this is the program and preview monitors. So it allows everybody to log into our control room and see what's going on. And then the other key component has been Zoom. You know, so many people use different platforms, and all of them can work for different people and different reasons. But we have an amazing engineering team, and we found that Zoom worked for us for our interviews. And so that is the primary way that we conduct interviews. We do use live view and satellite when needed, but your basic, I'm checking in from home, I'm an actor, a politician somewhere, anywhere around the world, Zoom is like one of the easiest accesses. So those are it's a long answer, but that's the primary way we get our show done.
Okay, I see what you mean, Denise. I see what you mean.
Tanya put, it's amazing. I feel like between the two of us, we've been in television for a long time, and I thought that we knew a lot about television, and this has showed me that there's still so much to learn, and the fact that we're able to pull this off, and really Tanya has led the charge in making sure that everyone is able to work remotely and still put on a show from day one. In quarantine, we were able to put on a show. So it's been pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And I do want to ask about that, but you guys have some pretty big news going on this week in that Stephen has returned to the Ed Sullivan Theater.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not doing the show from the stage. He's doing the show from a replica of his office. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to know, A, why'd you decide to take the show back to the Ed Sullivan Theater? Why did you not use the stage? And why did you build a replica of his office rather than just use his office?
Well, Stephen always says that the audience is a huge part of the show, and he means that, and we all mean that. And to be in that, I don't know if you said you've been in the Ed Sullivan Theater.
Oh yeah.
So to be in that theater, which so many amazing names and faces have gone through, to be in there empty, it kind of feels like a sin. I don't know. To me, I think A, would feel empty just physically, but also just it wouldn't feel right to be in there without the audience in there. So we decided to replicate his office, which he's super comfortable in. We love. It's cozy, and it's a nice go-between. If he's not going to be home and not in the theater, it's a nice go-between.
So, but I'm interested in this idea. I mean, he'd been doing the show from home for quite a while, seemed to be getting into the groove of doing it there. Why come back to the Ed Sullivan Theater, and why build a replica of his office rather than just use his office?
Going back to the theater was driven by the conventions and trying to be able to be live so that we could be topical. And there are just so many variables when you do it from home. That'd be tough to, it could be doable, but let's just say a lot of room for technical errors. And this way, with a crew and strong signals and we're able to get it on live. And then I think his office, because he loves it and he feels comfortable, and it was a good transition, like Denise was saying earlier. It's a place where he feels good in, and where a lot of, I guess it's a comfortable spot for him, and it's a good step in between the theater and his house. It was like the stepping point getting back into the theater.
So we have some people already asking questions, and one thing that they're asking is about the safety protocols that you may be using with the crew that have to particularly work at the Ed Sullivan Theater now. Can you talk a little bit about how you figured out what those protocols would be and what they are?
Yes.
Years off of our lives. No, I'm just kidding.
What's that?
I said years off of our lives.
I'll bet.
Let's just say, you know, we've been talking about how to get back since we've left, and it's been quite the hurdle. But the biggest hurdle of all was actually passing this task force who has the strictest of all regime policies, because they don't want to have any, you know, problems or issues. So we, I know that CBS, along with the other networks, and have been in talks with all the different unions that we work with. And I think we're adhering to the general rules that so many, and there's Chris, that have become industry standards, you know, so, you know, social distancing, clear spacing, and even visual help where people can stand. Elevator, we thought was going to be the biggest challenge of it all, because, you know, if you're on a movie set, like, you know, most of our TV productions are, everybody is distanced and or is in a space, and they have several other challenges because you have movie trailers, you have, you know, a lot of different, they have different challenges than we do. So it turns out that if you have 4 people facing each corner, wearing a mask and not talking is considered low risk because of the airflow. Just don't start any chit chat is the key. And so other than that, we're fine. And everywhere you look, hand sanitizer, sink, masks, and a lot of social distancing. And thank goodness for Zoom and the, you know, what we talked about earlier, and in terms of the communication.
And so, Denise, you were saying the biggest challenge you have is having a boss who's never on time for anything? Is that what you said?
Yes, that is exactly what I was saying, Eric. And there he is now.
Nicely done, Eric. Well, so, speaking as someone who's actually in the office building and the recipient of all of these precautions, I'm eternally grateful.
I'll tell you. Thanks for joining us, Chris. And I explained to the folks who were watching that you guys are actually doing an episode for tonight. So thank you so much for taking time out of actually producing a show to come talk to us.
If you want to blame someone for being late, it should be the new the Democratic ticket, because that event was delayed an hour. It delayed our entire process. So
I know. We covered it live on NPR too. We had the same problem. And you guys have to actually make it funny, which is even a bigger challenge. But I'd asked these guys about the move to the Ed Sullivan Theater and building the replica of Stephen's office, and then the safety protocols that you guys had to enact so that everybody could work in the office. I also wanted to ask and kind of go back in time a little bit to the original decision to start up production again after the pandemic had shut down production for a while. And how long did it take you guys to think about coming back? And how long did it take you to actually figure out how you could come back?
So I will say this because it will sound like false modesty or self-deprecating, but it's actually true. The 2 people who were with me were in my senior staff meeting, and this was probably end of February. And they said, listen, there's a really good chance that we're going to have to abandon the theater and shut down, and like the city could be in a lockdown situation and no one's going to come to work. And I'm like, guys, stop it. Like, let's not even have that conversation. If the staff even finds out that we're having that conversation, like, no. Like, maybe we do it without an audience, maybe like that far I could go, but like absolutely shutting down, I just wouldn't even let that enter my mind. They were like, that's adorable, Chris. And they just kept going and planning. And I literally think Tanya said, well, let us just keep going down that road just in case. I'm like, okay, but just keep it really quiet. And they made significant plans, getting equipment to people's houses, buying licenses for different software, You know, we got licenses for this thing called Zoom that no one had heard of. And so when you say, when was the decision to like go back into production, I don't think we ever let it enter our brain that we wouldn't be in production. You know, it was just, how do we do it? Not is it time to go back? And I, when you look at the first night that Stephen showed up in the bathtub, which was, we decided to cover the monologue of a repeat. I think that signaled to everybody like, oh, wait, we can do this from home. And that was so low tech because it was, you know, an iPad and an iPhone and a prompter software, I believe. And that almost killed us. Those 3 days, they were so difficult, but we learned, yeah, it was like, it took years off of people's lives because we had not done this before. And it was, imagine how long it takes for you to upload a video from your iPhone. And then imagine an editor has to put in graphics, and it was very, very difficult. And then we took what we learned. And when I say we, Tanya and Denise took what they learned and really smoothed out the process. So by the time we actually went, you know, we had a pre-planned hiatus, and it was not a hiatus. It was, the show wasn't on the air, but everybody was working to try to produce the show. And when we went back up, Stephen was in his house. And I would say we had a really pretty robust way of getting on television, and it just kept getting better and better and better. That's why this is such a great discussion for this group, because the writing process, that never really changed. That was like, oh, instead of in a room, we're going to be in a Zoom room, and like, you know, and rewrite is going to be via Zoom instead of being in a rewrite room. So that was in a lot of ways not the hard part, but the technical infrastructure that was built to get the show on the air in an acceptable way is really, really phenomenal. So that's a really long-winded way of saying we never kind of thought, oh, should we go back? It was just like, oh my God, we've got to get back on the air. Our audience needs us. Our host needs to talk to the audience. So it was never a consideration to not be on, as long as we could do it, you know, remotely.
Mm-hmm. You said initially he was using an iPhone and an iPad and some teleprompter software, and you know, all due respect, it kind of looked at, but at some point, you had an area in his house where he was leading the show, and you know, kind of stabilized the look and looked really nice. He seemed comfortable there. Once you got to that, well, tell me a little bit about getting to that point, because it seems like, you know, he was on a patio one time, and then you found this area in his home. He was wondering what to wear. Do I wear a suit? How did you sort of figure out what the right tone, what he should be wearing, and the technology, so that you could do the show for months from his house?
Well, I'll say this first. You saying that it kind of looked rough. A lot of people of the participants that are on this call will understand when I say we didn't want it to look too good. I am very cognizant that if we can make a show look just as good out of the studio, that somewhere in the wonderful Viacom CBS world, someone's going, hey, wait a second. Whoa. So you don't really need, so there's no incentive to like make it exactly as good as being in a studio. This is off the record. So
I appreciate that.
I can say that.
Us and 85 of our closest friends just heard that.
Right. But I mean, that's a thing. And then as far as the tone, Stephen just absolutely set that tone. You know, that it was a very authentic reaction to what was happening. But as far as how we got from the bathtub to the undisclosed location in his home, it's an incredible journey that, you know, Tanya and Denise can speak a lot better to, because they actually were the ones up all night doing it.
I also think, just tone wise too, that was kind of what I feel like it's what America was going through and what we were going through too. I mean, we all kind of, lockdown started, we all went and hid in our bathtubs, like, oh my God, what do we do? We eventually came out of the bathroom, went into our various corners of our homes to work, which is what Stephen did, right? And then we kind of looked out the window and we're like, it'd be great if I could go out there and hang with Squirrel, but I can't, so I'm going to stay in here. I kind of feel like what Stephen was doing was mirroring what the rest of the country and our viewers were doing, which I think they probably needed to see. I needed to see it.
Can you talk a little bit about what you ended up using when you settled on that area in his house? What were you using to capture his images? And what kind of safety protocols did you have to even get equipment to
him? Let's just say that one person was allowed in with completely social distance with the mask and glove, and this is after a lot of begging, to set it up once and left. And everything else was us talking through a Zoom to one of the family members and teaching them audio panels and the submenus and clicking camera focus. And could you raise the
Everyone has that friend or family member who's the one who Lysols their groceries. That's our Stephen.
Yeah.
So it'd be like, so Tanya would say to me, hey, we have to get the crew in to set this up. I go, okay, you have 1 hour on Saturday. And they, that's really that's kind of how it went down.
Wow. And so what, and just for our producer friends who are watching, can you briefly say what kind of camera you used or what your technology setup was there?
Well, we got a satellite truck. We had two paths back to the studio. We had live view and a satellite truck. So the satellite truck came, I'm pretty sure, with a Sony camera, and I'll get you the model if need be. But it was professional equipment, and we used their audio gear. So at least we knew we had upgraded from iPhones and iPads. But it was a Sony cam. I think it was a Canon lens. I will confirm that. But it's a professional remote ENG camera. And then little by little, we sent some lighting, better lighting equipment. And then we used a couple of different laptops for, in order for us to communicate to him, we actually set up a Zoom, we called it the spy cam. And everybody could see Stephen and he could see everybody, and Chris could talk and show run from home, and we would all know what was going on. And so those, and then we would have another Zoom laptop. So those were the primary ways to communicate back and forth.
Now, we had somebody asking from the audience quickly, if you could share again who makes Expression?
Ross, ROSS. And they make, Expression is the graphic machine that we use on our show. On the it's like a Deco or a Duet or one of the other graphics playback machine. But Ross is, I believe, a Canadian company, and they make several other technologies. And the remote control room is also made by them. So
Awesome.
It's fantastic because it allows us to take various inputs and do a live cut, which is what Zoom, Zoom can do that to an extent, but you have a few fixes and audio and timing issues. And that's what a live control room would allow you to do that.
I also have to brag on Tanya in that the showrunners from all the late night shows, we've been doing, actually thanks to a PGA event where I moderated a panel, we've kind of had this growing group of all of us. And we, back in the before times, we'd go to dinner or whatever, and we started doing an email chain when this started happening. It's basically all the late night showrunners, and about how are you handling audiences and things like that. And we've done a few during the pandemic, and I get to, they're talking about all of the struggles, and one host still uploads everything on his iPad and this and the other thing. And I'm showing them screenshots of my virtual control room, and I'm like, yeah, and I've got this thing on my iPad that it's a PL, and I can talk in Steven's ear from my thing. So I'm on the fancy kid because of all of the groundbreaking stuff that we've done, and it's been really cool. It's been really cool.
That's amazing. And that's the value, I guess, of planning ahead, right? You know, it's a good thing that you guys did that work.
Honestly, planning ahead is part of it, but I think the biggest part of it is creating an atmosphere where, one, every person is valued and appreciated, and they have a voice. So your best ideas can come from the least expected places. And that's what's been great, is that everybody, you start a process and everybody jumps in to make it better and comes up with ideas. So, and it's just listening and taking all of them and picking the ones that will work with the flow of the show the best. And, the talent that has come out of this is incredible. People who normally wouldn't speak up have been able to speak up and show their strengths and technical knowledge. And we also have great engineering team and an amazing crew. So, it was a time where they were able to jump in and stretch their muscles and help out. And they did.
Another incredibly specific technology question from our audience. What teleprompter software and equipment did you use in the beginning, and have you switched to something else since then?
Interesting. Well, aside from the iPad app, we actually used QTV, and we actually switched a couple of months into Stephen's home to IP versus going through the satellite, so that it eliminated a couple extra steps. So right now, our prompter operator is at home, and she speaks directly, her computer speaks directly to the prompter on site via, firewalls, a few firewall issues we've had to deal with. So we're IP-based QTV, and hopefully that answers the question, and I'm happy to send you a lot more information on it.
But that, that means that a teleprompter operator can sit in their house and not have to risk coming into the theater.
Yeah, that's
been great.
And somebody else asked about the original teleprompter software on the iPad. Did you guys happen to know what that was?
I am happy to get it for you. I know we used a couple different, our field department used a couple of different ones. I'm happy to get you the specific one. I know there are about 2 or 3 that are really good ones that different shows have used and are happy with. So whoever is interested, I'll be happy to send you the software. I don't know off the top of my head.
Sure. And I was wondering, since you have so many people working from remote now, how many people actually have to be at the Ed Sullivan Theater now to do the episodes that you're doing now?
Between 30 and 35. The first couple days back, we had 40, just so that we could, once the process is set up and the technical stuff is set up, and then it becomes, smoother sailing, then a couple of those people don't have to come in. And of those, during the show, we probably have 30 or less. The other folks, hair, makeup, wardrobe, certain props and such don't have to necessarily be on site while the show is happening. So they actually come on off days, and they're working because we're always shooting field shoots, cold opens and such. So they're shipping things to people's homes, getting them back. So it's not like they're sitting at home not working, but to prep everything for Stephen, to prep everything for John Batiste, to prep everything for our field shoots and cold opens, they'll do a lot of that from home and coming in and just set things up, leave. If we come up with a crazy prop or a crazy costume, then they'll come in. And as far as props go, to your point earlier about safety, we have a shopper that is in a car that goes to shop, delivers curbside. Another prop person picks up the prop, goes inside, unboxes it, sanitizes what's needed to use as a prop or use as a mock-up. So a lot of safety precautions.
And I think when you hear, oh, wow, there's 38 people or 40 people or whatever, I think like on my floor, there's 2 people, me and one other person. I think in a typical, this is our 3rd day back, in a typical day, I see maybe 5 people.
Wow.
You know, it's just very, very distanced all over the place. And, you know, we learned a lot because CBS News was in here. I don't know if you guys talked about that, but CBS this morning was in this theater, like once they shut down the broadcast center. And I think we learned a lot as a company about how to make things even better from there.
And before the pandemic, when you were typically in production, how many people would you have on site?
More.
It seemed to me, like, just as a fan, that it took Stephen a while to get used to not having an audience. And in fact, it seemed like a lot of the late night shows had to sort of figure out how to tweak their monologues, tweak some of the bits they were doing, figure out how to do a show when you don't have people laughing. When if you stop for laughter, there's nothing there. Was that a factor for you guys? And how'd you figure out how to craft the show to present it so it would still be entertaining, even though you didn't have that feedback from the audience?
Well, I'll take that just because I spent a lot of time with Stephen, and then I'm sure with Denise. But I think he had to relearn the whole way of hosting the show. I genuinely think that he, the whole energy is different. The whole, it's like doing a podcast as opposed to performing. It's just it's a very different energy, and I would say he still hasn't gotten used to it. I don't think he wants to get used to it. I think getting used to it is somehow surrendering to the fact that it's not going to go back to normal, and it's such a different energy. I think just being back in this building has been helpful. I think seeing Mark, the stage manager, and me, I've always been in his eye line when he did the model. I think those things are helpful, but I don't think you can get used to not having an audience. I don't think he wants to get used to that. Denise?
I was just gonna say, I like also, I mean, Steven's always made jokes about leaning into the awkwardness of things, and I just feel like he's done that with this. And I love watching it. To me, when if he says something, he's like, "What? Nothing? No laughs." I find joy in that, and he does it. He's leaning into the whole weirdness of this thing, and that just adds to the comedy for me as a viewer.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see him turn his family off camera into sidekicks in an interesting way.
That's his new audience.
Exactly. So you guys are nominated for an Emmy again. And I know you're always joking that John Oliver always wins. but how does it feel to sort of get nominated at a time when you've had to rise to the occasion and deal with this pandemic stuff? And what would it take to actually win an Emmy besides, like bribing all the people who vote?
I have to say, when they came and said, "Hey, we have to pick like an episode to put out for the Emmys, and what's the Emmy campaign and everything," the look on all of our faces was like, we're doing that? Like right. That's okay. It just seemed not to in any way denigrated, but it just seemed it fell into, and I think I speak for a lot of people, and even in this audience, and I know for a lot of the other late night shows, it just fell into this bucket of like, wow, that seems like something that mattered before. And then that was the initial thought. And then I think it was a real, it then became like, well, wait a second. This is actually more important than before, because we're recognizing that there's some normalcy. And in our case, the late night crew that I'm talking about, all of the shows that were nominated, even the ones that weren't, you're also recognizing that you continued to make content. And so it went from, well, what is this frivolous? No, we're just trying to get back on TV. That when you take a second and actually think about it, it's incredibly valuable. And I think we always talk, you know, the BS of, oh, it's great to be nominated and we're happy for whoever wins. Like there's a genuine brotherhood, sisterhood of the shows right now that we are, you know, the stuff we're talking about now about like what we've done to get on TV technically, we've shared that with them. Like that's open sourced with the other late night shows. We're not proprietary. Like if we found something that helps us get on the air, we talk to the other shows. I know for a fact, because I talk to the other showrunners, like, well, this is when we're thinking about getting back into the building. Here's some of the, you know, hurdles that we've had. They say, you know, well, we're thinking about this, but the company said this. Like, we're really open about stuff. So I genuinely, anybody that's nominated, I genuinely am happy for them, because I know firsthand what they have gone through, because we've gone through it as well. So it actually would mean a lot more than any other year for us to win. But I would be actually genuinely happy. And I know, look, if John Oliver wins again, I know all of the struggles that they've gone through firsthand and what they've done to get back on TV. And if Trevor Noah wins, I know how hard, you know, Jen and her team have had to work, particularly given the fact that in the middle of this, they go, hey, why don't you go 45 minutes? And why don't you, like, so we've really, you know, we've really had conversations and empathy for the other, the shows. And we're kind of more of a unified group than ever.
Denise, Tanya, you guys think? What do you think?
You know, to speak to Chris's point, it's like we're all calling each other about, you know, how are you doing this? What are you doing? Oh, you know, how are you shooting that? And it was interesting to see how everybody came up with devised their own way to make it work, and even made it more efficient over time. And if anything, it has brought us all together more so even than before. Right. I always feel like it's an honor. It'd be great if we ever win, but I feel so lucky to work on such a great show, on a show that I love the product and I love the people I work with. To me, I already win because of it, you know, as opposed to working on a show that's miserable. You know, not saying that shows, you know, and you get a statue, but, you know, a few years of working on an amazing show beats any statue. Not to say a nice little shiny statue isn't welcome, but that said,
if they offer it, you'll take it. You'll take
I was going to say, just give me the damn statue already.
There you go. There you go. So what would it take for you to get to the point where you could actually have an audience again?
Oof.
Vaccines?
I mean, you know, New York
used
is
to say
opening up
vaccines.
schools.
Yeah, I know. And as a parent who has 2 kids that are going back to school here in the city, I used to say a vaccine. I think it's when, I think it's when people are able to go into a situation with other people and they cannot think about being in that situation with other people. Because if you have a group of people in a theater who are thinking, well, is this person getting me, am I putting myself at risk? Like, you're not going to enjoy comedy. You're not going to enjoy yourself. It's not an escape. It's kind of like, you know, when restaurants first open and if you have to be inside, like the whole point of going to a restaurant is to kind of not worry about anything and to enjoy yourself. So I think it's not the vaccine. I think look, it might be, hey, we can do rapid testing and you know everyone around you is not infectious. And, you know, so I'm not saying it's 2 years away. It could be quicker than a vaccine, actually. If you're, I think the metric is when you can get X number of people, doesn't have to be a full house, but X number of people into a room where they are not thinking about, are they going to get sick?
And do you think it would be possible to do a socially distanced audience where you know, every fifth?
No, because you're laughing. So what we know about and believe me, I know so much about droplets and air filters. And do you know that our theater has recycled air? And, you know, like, you know, no, we're in a very, you know, but no, the laughing and you're not kind of just sitting in a room, like, you know, listening, like you're actively participating. So if I have to put this off, like, would I ask my staff to come in? Would I ask someone, would I sit in an audience? You have to just not even worry that the people around you are sick.
Wow.
And I think we'll get there.
So another question that we're getting from the crowd is what other safety precautions, inventive workarounds that the task force recommended that either surprised you or helped people feel safe?
Tanya, you lived and breathed this stuff.
What helped us feel safe?
Any
Or
surprises?
surprised you.
So sorry.
I mean, for me, the elevator, the elevator thing was the most surprising. To talk to the leading expert in the world on transmission of COVID through the air, literally, guy in Harvard, and him to go, you're actually much more at risk waiting in the lobby than actually being in the elevator. That probably was the because of the amount of time you're in there, and if you have a mask, and if you don't talk,
Right.
That probably was the most surprising.
Yeah, I would agree with him. And then the other thing is the gloves, giving a false sense of security is the other thing. The one thing to do, and I've heard this and read, been living and breathing this, safety protocols, wash your hands, make it a habit, wash your hands. If everybody is wearing at least a 3-ply or more, socially distancing, wash your hands. That's the other one. Gloves can be a false sense of security. And so it's not even required. Sanitizing and washing your hands is what's required.
The other thing that was surprising, I didn't learn from the task force, but I learned from Dr. John LaPook on our show, was talking about testing and the false sense of security from testing, because you have a 14-day incubation period. And if you 8 days after an exposure get tested and you're negative, the 9th day you might become infectious. So you might have been infected on day 1, but you're not infectious. But then the day after you take the test, it doesn't mean that you weren't infected 8 days before. So that's why the 14-day quarantine. That's why when a state like Massachusetts says, well, if you show us a test, you're good, you don't have to quarantine. It's a ridiculous protocol, which is why New York has the 14-day, which is why we're doing all kinds of testing, because it's not like, hey, I went to this big wine tasting party on a Wednesday and 5 days later I tested negative, so I'm good.
Right.
I thought that was interesting.
And I know this doesn't directly relate to what you're doing, but I've been really interested in following what Tyler Perry's been doing in terms of getting people tested, flying them to his compound, testing them again, then going into production for 2 weeks, having everybody be sequestered, and then doing it again for another show. He's in the middle of his 2nd show. And he claims that they found a few people when they were doing the preliminary testing, but they haven't had any outbreaks on the set. Is there any, can you learn anything from seeing that? Is there anything about, we've seen a few attempts to start production or do little things across Hollywood. Can you learn from that? Does any of that relate to what you're doing?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we have to, and I'll let Tanya talk about this more, but like what's different is he's putting people in a bubble. We can't put people in a bubble. People go out into the world. So I think our approach is more like pretend everybody has it. So if someone came in here and has it, how do you not transmit it, as opposed to how do we keep everyone from getting it? Because people go out into the world. My kid could come home from school and give it to me. So it's more like try to find out if people have it through the testing. And if you miss it and someone has it, what is the least likely chance that you're going to spread it to other people once you're here? So it's a different approach than Tyler, right, Tanya?
Yes, and we are testing twice. We have a 4-day-a-week show, so every other day we test. And one of the testing, and we're eventually going to shift to it, is we get results within a couple hours, but those are rare to find these days. And the other one we test, I think, on Wednesday, but we get the result the next day. So we at least know the beginning of the week and the end of the week when people go home that they're that they're clean, or they come in and they're clean. But like Chris said, we're not in a bubble. I have a husband who's on golf right now, and they fly everybody and they quarantine for 5 days in a hotel room, and they get tested twice before they go into a control room. And then they go from one site, they charter a plane, they go to another site. So in theory, even though you're traveling around and mixing with a lot of crew, everybody is in different pods. The A team travels in a charter with the A team. We can't do that. So the best thing we can do is provide private transportation to and from home, and abide by all the protocols, you know, we talked about earlier. And like Chris said, assume everyone has it so that you're not infecting people around you. I think it's the best thing that you can do and still live in a world where we can do a show like ours.
So, so I think I agree with Denise that Tanya is the MVP of your particular operation, judging by this panel. But I was going to say, just as a fan, before the pandemic hit, I thought the unsung hero in your operation was Brian Stack. I love the work
He's our mascot
does on the cold opens and things like that. And
Eric, I have to tell you, like, because this is a PGA event, and I've learned so much from being involved with the organization. The people who are listening to this event, this is what producing is. These two people. This is what, when you talk about what does a producer do? A producer gets something on TV, and a producer, you know, finds a way to make it all work. And these two have been, I mean, talk about thrown into the fire. Like, it is the definition of what a producer does. And also, as you can see, they're just like, well, yeah, that's what we do, which is very producer of them. So I didn't mean to interrupt there. I just wanted to say that, Eric.
That's kind of a New York kind of thing. It's what we do, you know. Hey, so I got to think that we're getting close to time. I'm sorry if I look distracted, but we were only supposed to take a half an hour. I'm sure we're past that, but you guys gave us so many great answers. Thank you so much for joining us, Chris Licht.
Thanks for doing it, Eric.
Denise Rehrig, Tanya Bracco. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope.